Hey folks, today I'm talking about my recent surgery and how knitting played a role in the recovery. Okay, so I'll try and break this up into chapters. So if you're interested in kind of like jumping ahead or specific topics, it's a little bit easier to find. Before I get into the details though, I wanted to mention I am wearing my Anacortes tee. I will put details about it up here. And I am working on the Prospect tee. Again, I'll put details about both of these patterns up here, and you can find them in my Ravelry. Hey folks, welcome. I'm Dawn. This is Tangled Together, where I talk about my knitting hobby as well as the other things in life that get tangled up in it. I had mentioned in a previous video that I was going to be having a hysterectomy. I am now 4 or 5 weeks out. I'm a month out. And I still have one follow-up appointment just to like fully clear me for everything. But I feel pretty much normal at this point. And also just with schedule, this was kind of the best opportunity I had to like sit down and talk about this. So if anything changes in the next couple of weeks, I'll add like a pinned comment or something to this post. But yes, as of filming this, I'm feeling overall pretty normal. And a quick disclaimer, I am not a medical professional. None of this is medical advice at all. If you were having a hysterectomy or you were having any kind of surgery, listen to your doctors, take their advice, follow their instructions. I'm sharing my personal experience with it. Just that disclaimer to start out. This is not medical advice at all. Listen to your doctors. First off, why did I need a hysterectomy and what was the procedure? So I had a total laparoscopic hysterectomy with bilateral salpingectomy. I'm looking at my notes over here. My ovaries were not removed, so that should not affect like hormones and all of that. And it was done laparoscopically, so that meant I had a much faster recovery time. The reason for the hysterectomy was I had a couple of fibroids that caused my uterus to be about 10 times the size that it should be. I had a scan back in January, like an ultrasound back in January, that estimated the uterus size was about the size of a 22-week pregnancy. And I had been diagnosed with these fibroids about 7 years ago, but at the time, like I could feel there was something there. They determined it was kind of just normal fibroids, and because of where they were located and the symptoms I was having, it kind of got determined to not do any treatment at the time. Now, the fibroids did grow significantly during pregnancy and actually caused some complications during pregnancy, but they shrank back down postpartum. And this was something that like when I had my C-section, we asked about like, can you do anything about the fibroids? But for various reasons, it was determined not to do anything at the time. They were really hoping that like they'd shrink back down just as my hormones changed postpartum. And that did happen, but then about maybe 2 years ago, I would say, it felt like they started to kind of grow again. And last fall, I really started noticing the size was significant. Like I couldn't lay on my back without having basically that like, what is the nerve? Sciatic nerve pain. It's something that a lot of people experience with pregnancy, and one of the reasons they tell you not to like sleep on your back when you're pregnant. As well as I started having a lot of discomfort and pain and some like digestive and abdominal issues. I wasn't having like heavy bleeding or anything like that. I had an IUD that caused me just to not have periods at all. But so it wasn't in the like, oh yeah, you need to have this because you're anemic or you're bleeding too much, that a lot of people experience with fibroids, but I was starting to have issues. And so in talking with my doctor, we kind of determined that the best option was just to have a hysterectomy. It was kind of the procedure that had the least chances of having issues than just going in and removing the fibroids. I can't grow any new fibroids because I don't have a uterus for them to grow in. And Ryan and I had determined that even before this, that our family was complete for various reasons, and kind of if we ever changed our mind on that, we would pursue other means of adding in it to our family. And going into the operation, I was in overall good health. Really, the main thing was the like discomfort and digestive stuff going on, but beyond that, I was in pretty good health going into it, which I think really did help contribute to like the speed of my recovery. Now going in, my doctor had told me with this kind of procedure, most people feel about 80% better, like about 2 weeks out, and close to normal at the like final month to 6 week post-op appointment. And my experience has aligned pretty closely with that. Okay, so now that I've gotten the like what procedure I had done and why out of the way, let's talk about my actual experience. So, you know, I had some pre-op appointments and some tests and blood work and all of that, but I'm gonna kind of talk more about like pre-op going in, day of, and through recovery. So yeah, it was a laparoscopic, and my procedure was one that I went home the afternoon after the surgery, which was really great to be able to go home and recover in my own bed. So yeah, I had to show up a couple hours before the surgery was scheduled and go through the pre-op stuff. I did bring my knitting with me, and I was very glad I had that for the pre-op. Timing wise, Ryan dropped me off at the hospital because of course the time for me to arrive was at the same time as drop off for our kids' school. So he dropped me off a little early, went and dropped her off, and then came back and joined me. But yeah, for that little bit when I was in the waiting room without him, and then they took me back into the pre-op room, and initially he wasn't allowed back in when they were doing like getting me in the gown and doing some of the like sanitation stuff, and some like initial getting the IVs in and all of that prep. He wasn't allowed back there with me for probably about the first hour. So I was very glad that I brought my knitting because it provided a really good distraction. It provided a really good way for me to kind of work through and stay calm, work through some thoughts and initial feelings of like, oh gosh, this is really happening. And more than anything, it was just like a nice distraction because like there was a TV in the pre-op room, but nothing was really like, oh yeah, I want to watch this and this is going to distract me. So yeah, and then you know, they took me back for the surgery, and in the words of the doctor in post-op, it was a routine, boring procedure, which is what you want to hear about your surgery. Yeah, and then we came home that afternoon. I feel like I got released really quickly. You know, they needed me to urinate after the surgery to make sure that my bladder was functioning properly. I woke up as kind of once I became really conscious after the surgery. That was one of the first things that I asked about. So just they had been hydrating me so much that my bladder was very full. And I think also because the fibroid had been taking up so much space in my abdomen, My bladder was used to being much smaller. That has been something I feel like has been a big change post-op, that I don't have to pee quite as much. So yeah, we came home after the surgery, very, very grateful. All right, if things kind of changed, the sun really went behind the clouds, so I had to bump up the brightness. So yes, that first night, I didn't do any knitting. I was coming off anesthesia. I was kind of dozing on and off. I got up probably once every hour or two to use the bathroom or needing to move around a little bit, take medications, get a drink of water. I'll get more into things that I found super helpful in a moment. But I also couldn't really lay down very comfortably. That was probably I wasn't in a lot of pain at that point because I still had the pain meds from the hospital, and they gave me some pretty decent pain meds to take at home. I think the second day was the day I was kind of in the most amount of pain. But yeah, that first night, there was no knitting. It was really just dozing on and off, letting all of the anesthesia and everything wear off. The second day was really when I started picking up back up my knitting. I was really sore, and I did need to get up quite a bit, because of the procedure they did. They filled my abdomen with gas to allow them space to get in and see what they were doing, and they got as much of the gas out of it, but I was warned by a nurse, hey, they often aren't able to get 100% of that, so you might have some gas that kind of takes some time to work its way out of your system. And you might feel it as shoulder or back pain. It's what's the term? If I don't use the right term, I'll put it up here, but it's a transferred pain where the gas is actually pushing on your diaphragm, and because your brain's this doesn't make sense for there to be pain here, it oftentimes your nerves and the nerve that it's connected to, you'll feel it in your shoulder or upper back, to the point that, especially for women, someone can think that they're having a heart attack. So yes, the nurse said, if I do feel this kind of pain, getting up and moving around often can relieve it. I also was told to take Gas-X and in addition to some of the other medications to help get rid of that excess gas. So over the next few days, I spent a lot of time knitting. I was kind of in bed the first 3 or 4 days post-surgery, and would get up to use the bathroom. I'd get up to go downstairs and get something to eat or some water and be great, I did the thing, now I'm gonna go take a nap, because I was just so tired. Day 2, I feel was the most pain I was in, and then it kind of slowly got better. There were definitely ups and downs to that. But for me, knitting provided this really great thing to do. I was also watching shows and listening to podcasts and stuff like that as a distraction to pass the time. But really, knitting was this really great, I felt I was doing something, but it also didn't require so much concentration, so that when I was really tired or kind of not with it, in pain, I didn't need to fully concentrate on it. And I had a couple of projects I was working on. So I had a staff and light that I was working on. I'll grab it in a minute and show you the progress that I made on it, as well as I did finish off a sweater for my daughter, and I had a sock. Did I work on the sock at all? I don't think I actually worked on the sock, but I had it kind of in my project bag that I had next to our bed, so that if I needed something just mindless, I could go and grab that. And me using knitting as a distraction and from the pain turns out to actually have some science behind it. There's been a couple of different studies that have shown that creative endeavors, including things like knitting, needle pointing, crafting, can help with pain management. Basically, it activates brain regions that also modulate pain processing, and it competes with your brain's attention and often can like win against the pain element. And I feel like especially like with the gas pain, it did not cut through that. But with the overall soreness, and as long as I wasn't having pain from like moving in a way, it like sharp pain, it did not distract from. But the kind of dull ache that I was experiencing, especially that first week, it did provide a good distraction from that. The first few days, I did not have much of an appetite. My husband was home the first week. He was working from home. So he was regularly like making sure I had plenty of water, bringing me tea or coffee, making sure I had food, and just kind of generally checking in, doing whatever he could to help out. But those first few days, I pretty much stayed in bed and knitted when I was awake, dozed quite a lot, and made it through almost all of shrinking in that first week, and also listened to some Critical Role. I had to wait, I think it was 72 hours after surgery to shower. Taking the shower felt so good. Like, it was exhausting. I was like, cool, I took a shower, now I'm gonna lay down and take a nap. But it was just so nice to like rinse everything off. And also like the warm water felt nice. That evening, I was actually able to sleep like on my side, not just like sitting up, and was able to get like a full 6 hours of sleep that way before needing to like wake up and move around and take more medication. And so I feel like day 4 kind of, that was the turning point for me for like really starting to feel better. Now, something I did also experience those first couple of days is my throat was really sore, and I actually lost my voice, like I think it was day 3. As Ryan was like, oh my gosh, are you okay? I was like, yeah, I feel fine, I just have no voice. And I think that was because of the breathing tube that they put in during surgery. Around day 4 and 5, I started experiencing some like itching. I think that like healing itching. And I did find the first couple of days I did use an ice pack. And by that point I could start using like a heating pad for like relaxing and relieving pain and discomfort. I still used the ice pack a little bit more than the heating pad, just because things still felt sore and swollen, more so than like sore in the muscle area. The second week after surgery, I was no longer taking the stronger pain medication that was the like, don't drive when you're on this. So I was able to do a little bit of driving just to drop my kid off at school and pick her up, because at that point my husband needed to be like back in the office and doing some in-person meetings, and I was feeling well enough to be able to do that. I'll get more into like how we handled things with our kid in a little bit, but that did take quite a bit of effort. But by that point I was able to get around quite a lot better. So I would usually like drop the kid off at school, come home and kind of doze/sit on the couch. It was also nice to, by that point, feel well enough to not need to be in bed, but to be actually like sitting on a couch and in a different position. After that point, it was a lot of, there was still some soreness. I still have a little bit of tightness and soreness when I move. I did get cleared after like, I think it was a 10-day appointment for lifting things over 10 pounds, but not over 20. And for most activity, kind of like going back to most things, because I was at that like 80% feeling better. Now, the big thing that I experienced that was a bit of an adjustment was endurance. I would do like regular household chores and be like, okay, great, I need to lay down and take a nap. And so for me, it was a lot of pacing myself, asking for help, asking for support from my husband, sometimes from my kid, where I was like, hey, can you pick this up and hand this to me so I don't have to bend over? And adjusting how I did some things. Like, I was doing a lot of squats instead of bending at the waist to get down and up, to reach things. I found twisting, I had to be very careful with how I twisted. And there are definitely some clothing that I have slowly been reintroducing. As far as like how I'm feeling now, I was so surprised by and like the physical difference. My husband commented several times about like, oh my gosh, you look different. Because like by the couple weeks before the surgery, I was starting to look pregnant. There were definitely some clothes that I was like, I can't wear this because people are going to ask if I'm pregnant. And I didn't realize how much discomfort I was in until like the last week or two, where I was like, oh, I'm sitting on the couch in positions that a month, 2 months ago, I would not be able to sit in because it was uncomfortable. Like I just felt bloated and uncomfortable so much of the time, and I didn't even necessarily realize it. And also, like, now my clothes are fitting better. I have pants that I can wear again, although it has been slow introductions, so which I'll get into that in a moment when I talk about things I found helpful and things I wish I'd done differently. Okay, before we get into that, I do want to just address like how we handled this with our kid. So we have a preschooler, and luckily the surgery occurred during her school year. She's in a pre-K program, and so that was really great to have that for like during the day, during the week. She was at that. That was a normal routine. So leading up to the surgery, we kind of talked to her about it. Like I think about a month before we started introducing the idea, and then talked in a little bit more detail as we got closer and closer. She was so sweet and told me like I could take one of my stuffies with me. She asked if I needed to get a shot as part of it, and I was like, yeah, because IV's pretty much like getting a shot. And she was like, you can take a stuffy and hold it and cuddle it so you feel better. And then we had a friend who went and picked her up from school that day because just timing wise, we weren't entirely sure if I was going to be out of surgery or out of post-op and released in time to pick her up from school. And I'm very glad we did, because I think I was out of surgery by that point. I was not aware, but I wasn't released to go home until like an hour and a half after her school released. And my husband had to be there, or I had to have another adult there to take me home. And he certainly wanted to be there just to know what was going on, to be able to make decisions if the surgery had any complications or anything. So yeah, we had a friend who, the plan was, and this is what actually happened, was that like she picked our kid up from school, took her home, and they spent the afternoon and evening doing fun things. She even stayed and did pretty much all of bedtime, because I did get home before our kiddo went up for bed. I'm really glad that I did, just because then I got to like see her. She got to see me and see like everything's okay, everything's fine. But then most of bedtime was taken care of so that like my husband could focus on making sure that I was okay. And then he went up and like read a book and did the final like bedtime stuff. But like all of the getting in the PJs and brushing the teeth was not something he had to worry about. And then he was home. He worked from home for that first week, so he took care of school drop-off and pickup. She, most afternoons, would come up and, like, lay in bed next to me, and we watched, like, some episodes of Bluey and some, like, PBS Kids shows together while I kind of dozed off. And then my sister-in-law very, very kindly came and spent the first weekend here. And then there were just quite a lot of those first few days reminding her, be gentle, and I can't, you know, pick her up, and all of that. But she's gotten it, and she still even now is like, oh, Mama can't do this because she's recovering. I want to close out by talking about the things that I found really helpful for the recovery process, as well as things I kind of wish I had done differently. So I did talk about knitting being very helpful to the recovery process. Definitely suggest if you're going through any kind of recovery from surgery where you're able to like move your arms around and stuff. Like I had a friend who went through another procedure that was took a much longer recovery process and also affected, like, she couldn't move her arms quite as much, and so she was not able to do her crafting. I'm very glad I was able to keep doing my crafting. But if not, or if you don't like knit or something, like coloring books would be super useful, video games, something that takes your attention. I would say even more than just like listening to a podcast or reading a book or watching a TV. Like, I feel like something with your hands is going to be a better distraction, and I think that is something that helps with that like pain management element, is that it's not just distracting, but it's activating your brain. And I'm glad that I was working on projects that didn't require too much thought, and I had a couple of different projects if I got tired of one, which I did. I did switch between projects. I wouldn't try and pick up a new skill, but having different levels of attention that you need to pay to the projects was helpful to be able to switch between those, and also just like, oh, I've been knitting this shirt for 12 hours. I want to do something else. I'll knit this sweater. One thing I found super helpful, and I would recommend anybody who's getting a hysterectomy, is a hysterectomy pillow. So yeah, I just got this off Amazon, and it has a strap to go over your neck and then another strap that you can use to go around your waist. And it's got a pocket in the back here for heating or cooling pads, and then there's a place you can put your arms in, and this also has like pockets in the front. I would put my phone and small stuff in this front pocket. This was so helpful because after a hysterectomy, any kind of abdominal surgery, being able to put some pressure on it actually helps, especially like getting up or moving around, sneezing. This also was very helpful in the car ride home because it provided a buffer for the belt strap, that it wasn't putting as much direct pressure, it distributed the pressure a little bit more. And then it also had like a nice spot for those ice and heating packs. I had this on pretty much constantly that first week, and then I continued to use it at night for the next 2 weeks after that until just fairly recently. Less at night because I necessarily needed it. Like, it was certainly helpful to have it, like, if I needed to roll over, to put some pressure, but also to keep our dog from punching me in the stomach. And also just to make sure, like, if my husband rolled over, he didn't bump me or something. Like, it was just a nice little, like, force field of protection. Am conflicted on, like, it is a little bit of a one use, and now I'm like, what do I do with this? Because it's so specific. I don't feel like it really works well as, like, we can just use it for other things, but would highly recommend having some kind of hysterectomy pillow. The other thing that we got that I'm so glad we did is a wedge pillow. So this allowed me to recline or sit up. We got one that kind of velcros together, has 4 pieces, and you can put them together in different combinations. It had the, like, triangle piece that you can go put under your knees. Especially those first few nights where I could not lay down. So helpful. I know some people said, like, oh, if you have a recliner, try sleeping in that. I think maybe if you have a recliner, that might work because you can adjust, like, height and everything. But for me, the wedge pillow actually was better because there were times where it's like I could kind of lay on my side a little bit, but being elevated helped. I could move where my knees were, the support for that. It allowed me to, like, sit up a little bit, or times where it was like, okay, sitting up fully is not comfortable, but I couldn't recline. I could also be in my bed, which I knew was comfortable, and, like, have my pillows and all of that. Having some kind of, like, nightgown, muumuu, oversized dress, so helpful. I had a, like, t-shirt nightgown thing that I wore for the first couple of days, and that was really great because you're not going to probably want to have anything around your waist. And yeah, the one thing with that is I wish I had thought a little bit more through the post-op what I was wearing. I was planning on, like, okay, I'll just wear that. I had post-op and head home from there. But the day of my surgery, it was abnormally cold for the end of April. So I ended up having a, like, oversized sweater on top of it, and had leggings. The leggings I wore to the hospital, I wore those home because the, like, pajama pant, like, sweatpants, I knew the waistband was going to put too much pressure on my abdomen. So I just wore the leggings and, like, didn't pull them up all the way, essentially. All of the dresses I could have worn were short dresses. I didn't have any long dresses. So that's something I would keep in mind, like, depending on the time of year and the weather, have something that's long enough to cover your legs when you're leaving the hospital. Elastic waistbands. This is something I wish I had done differently, because I had, like, pajamas and one pair of sweatpants that I felt like were fine at home or fine for, like, school runs, but in the couple of weeks where I was post-op and, like, feeling well enough to start hanging out with friends and going about more of my daily life, but still, you know, sore and recovering, I found it really difficult to wear normal pants and jeans. And I'm also not, like, a person that has a whole lot of dresses, so maybe dresses would be a good option here. But the reason I didn't want to wear a lot of normal pants and jeans is because the button fell kind of right around the main incision site, because the laparoscopic, they went in through my belly button. So that has a scar there that's healing. And there was a certain point where it was like, okay, it's healed enough that I don't have to wear a bandage on it, and I want it to, like, breathe and all of that, but I kind of had to wear a bandage because the very top of it was right like at the curve of my belly button, kind of stuck out, and it would catch on my pants. And that felt so weird and like weird nerve zingy. So I usually would wear a Band-Aid over that just as a buffer. And I found that the elastic waistband didn't bother it quite as much and also allowed me to like adjust where my pants were sitting. Like standing would often be fine, but I'd sit down and be like, oh, this is now the waistband of my pants is pushing in or sitting at a spot that's not really comfortable. And with elastic waistbands, I was able to like adjust that when I sat down or move it around. Like if it had just been sitting on one spot for a while and that was starting to feel sore, could kind of like scooch it down or scooch it up a little and not look too weird. Another thing that I'm so glad my doctor suggested and I did it was I started taking the Miralax, the like stool softener, a couple of days before surgery. And so glad I did. It made things so much better. It was still not comfortable the first couple of bowel movements, but I feel like was much, much better and kind of got into my system ahead of time, ahead of all of the other things that could cause constipation. Now, one thing I wish I'd started taking sooner is Gas-X. I was told like, hey, go pick up some Gas-X. This might be helpful for some of that trapped gas, as well as just like my bowels and everything after the fact. And I kind of didn't take it until I started having that gas pain. And I think if I had maybe taken it a little bit sooner, you know, not necessarily like preempting anything happening, but if I had stayed a little bit more on top of like, okay, when can I take it? How frequently can I take it? Let's just take that as a regular interval along with some of my other, like I was with my other medications. I think that might have helped some of that like gas pain. That was really the main thing that I was getting woken up because of that. It was like really disruptive to being able to like allow my body to rest, and was the pain that like even when I was on the strong painkillers, it was cutting through. As far as like eating goes, I'm so glad that I meal prepped. My husband did cooking and bringing me food and everything, but it just removed an element of like stress for both of us. And I knew there were going to be some things that I liked that we could just heat up whenever I wanted them. We did some ordering. He made a few things, but I meal prepped a couple of things, including a split pea soup that I had so much of that split pea soup because I was like, okay, there's a lot of really good nutrients in this. It's soft, which those first few days my throat was really sore, and that was the main thing that I ate. And so I was like, I'm getting some good nutrients in here, and it's also just something that I really like. And the other thing I'm really glad I got as far as like food-wise goes is Jell-O. This was something that I kind of got last minute on a suggestion from one of my friends in my knitting group, who had also undergone a surgery, and she was like, get Jell-O because of, you know, dealing with throat irritation after the surgery and breathing tubes and all of that. She said that made a huge difference for her of like getting some hydration, because she didn't even want to like drink water a couple of times. And I had that too. There were a few times that like I woke up and I was like, I know I need to hydrate. I know I need to eat something and get some like calories in me. But the thought of like eating food or drinking something did not sound appetizing. But like the Jell-O was a good consistency that felt good on my throat and kind of like, I don't know, conditioned, like warmed things up, that I was like, okay, now that I've had this, I can have something to eat that has more nutrients in it, or I can drink some more water, to the point that like my daughter would bring me up a thing of Jell-O and a spoon after school because she knew it helped me. Hey, real quick, I already took my mic off, but I realized I didn't show you what I was working on. The main thing I was working on is the Staffen Light. And I almost finished this, but I think I need to order another ball to do the finishing or rip out my gauge swatch. And I couldn't find my gauge swatch while I was the first couple of weeks of recovering. So I do need to finish this off. And the other thing that I worked on was I finished my daughter's Dagmar sweater. I was about like here on the first sleeve, and you will notice that the cable got a little off. I forgot to do like a double thing, but when I cast on the second sleeve and I got through the whole second sleeve, I did the same thing at the same point so that they match. They're the same length and they end kind of. It's not something that I feel like I'm going to be too upset about. But yes, I finished this. And I'll talk more about it in my next video, talking about everything that I knit in May. So there you go. I hope that this wasn't too rambly. I hope there's stuff that in here that helped you. Hey, I was able to get a couple of rows in on this tee. Did I go too far? No, I didn't go too far. And hopefully you got some knitting done. If you are having a hysterectomy, I hope this provided you some help, some experience of like seeing somebody's perspective who's gone through it. And, you know, I certainly I've got some feelings about it and some things I'm working through like mentally and everything, but overall I'm so glad that I did it. And it's not something that I feel like I'm going to regret, because I already, I'm still dealing with some restrictions and some things are uncomfortable, not necessarily painful, but uncomfortable. But overall, I already feel so much better. Thank you for watching this far. I'm going to get back to kind of normal knitting focus stuff in the future. But yeah, I'd love to hear if you also had a hysterectomy, what are the things that you found super helpful? Were you knitting something while I was, while watching this video? What were you working on? And yeah, do you also find crafting helpful for recovery? I think it's great. I'm so glad that I had this as a resource. A quick thanks to all of our patrons. If you want to directly support the channel, make sure you're subscribed and consider heading on over to our Patreon page. If you want to follow along with more of my day-to-day stuff, you can follow me on Instagram and check out my projects on Ravelry. Okay, bye! Someplace I call home.